and welcome to my furniture painting channel. I'm Connie from Faff Designs. In the video today I'm going to do a bit of a beginner's guide, if you like, to furniture painting. So you have your piece that you've bought from a charity shop or Facebook Marketplace, and where do you go? Where do you start from? Where's the starting point? What are the steps you need to take to get a piece of furniture that is painted? So I can't help you with colour decisions, don't ask me those, but I'm just going to do a really simple finish today, a one colour finish using silk mineral paint, and hopefully talk you through the steps of how you can get something that's pretty dated but perfectly functionable and turn it into something that's more suitable for your decor scheme, or something that you can sell on and make a little bit of profit from. Okay, so you've bought your piece from a charity shop or secondhand, or you have a piece that's already in your home and it's no longer suitable for whatever reason. Maybe the colour is just a bit dated. This pine piece is a perfect example of something that is really functionable, really handy for storage, but it just looks a bit dated. So it's solid pine and the handles are a bit sort of cheap and nasty, and yeah, it's just looking a bit orange for my liking. So this is actually a piece that I have bought off one of my followers over on Instagram. She contacted me, she's local, and she said, I've got a piece of furniture, don't use it anymore, do you want it? So I bought it off her second hand, and I'm actually going to keep this piece of furniture because these tall boys are really handy for storage, and I lack a good amount of storage in my home. So I am going to actually paint this for myself. I'm going to use white, bear with me on this one, because it is for my bedroom, and my bedroom is a very sort of deep, rich emerald green all over. So the decor style has to be plain. So you have to take into account, if you're painting it for yourself, take that into account first of all. I get quite a lot of questions asking me, what colour shall I paint this? What colour shall I paint that? I don't know your decor schemes. I don't know what colour schemes you like. I could suggest blue or purple and you could hate those colours. So for me, most of my pieces of furniture in my bedroom are actually really muted tones or neutrals because the walls are so vivid. So that's why I'm going to paint this piece white. I also have another piece of furniture in there that is white, so they're kind of going to match. Although they are two completely different pieces of furniture, it's kind of going to match and tie in. So that's what I'm going to do to this, and hopefully talk you through the steps that I would take in order to get from something like this that hasn't even been touched, it's still got a bit of a sticker on there, to something that is pretty functionable, goes with your current decor, something that you can use again. So the first thing you need to do once you have your piece is you need to determine what the current finish is, what the factory finish is on this piece. So it can be a number of different things, but the two most common things are some kind of varnish or wax. As you may know if you subscribe to my channel, I do pick up quite a lot of waxed pieces because that's the kind of furniture that I like and I like working on. This isn't waxed. There's a really easy way you can tell if something is waxed or not, and that is by just using your fingernail and scratching on the surface of the piece. If you get a residue of product under your nail, that's most likely to be waxed. I have this question all the time. That's the easiest way to do it. If nothing comes off under your nail, then it's likely to be a varnish. So with a waxed piece, there is a little bit more prep work involved because that wax has to be stripped off. If you want to watch the video, I'll link one here, and it'll take you to another video on my channel where you can see the process of how to strip a wax piece in order to get it ready for painting. This piece isn't waxed, it's a varnish, which is good because it's going to save us a little bit of time, and I'll show you what I do to get this ready for painting. Okay, so first off, I am going to take off all the handles. I've got this really inexpensive screwdriver. You don't need any expensive tools at all to upcycle furniture, especially if you're just doing something for your own home. I only invested in tools once I'd been doing this for a couple of years. So it's just a screwdriver, it's got interchangeable heads, and I'm just going to take all of the handles off. Okay, the next thing I do is I always grab my hoover and make sure I give it a quick hoover inside and out. So you'll notice I've just turned it upside down. There was a few cobwebs here because it had been sat in a garage for a while. And I also make sure that I hoover the interior of the drawers. Okay, so you have hoovered your piece, you have taken the handles off. If you wanted to take the handles off, if you're going to swap them out, or if you obviously don't want to paint over the handles, preference is yours. So we've done that step. The next step, which is really important and never want to skip, is to clean your piece. This is Dixie Belle's White Lightning. This is what I use. But just whatever you use, make sure it's a degreasing cleaner. And that's because what the buildup of stuff that could be on that surface, it could be anything from the oils off your hands to cleaning products to food spills. You don't know what has been on that piece. But a degreasing cleaner will cut through anything that's on there and give you, got loads of dust, it will give you a really clean surface to start your piece. The reason we clean is because anything that's built up on that surface will actually cause your paint to not adhere to that surface. So if you've ever painted something before and it started to chip or peel or scuff away, it's probably because your prep wasn't as good as it should have been. You don't have to spend hours on prep, that's not necessary, but what you do need to do is clean. So the way that I usually do it is I have a designated bucket for cleaning. In here I've got warm water, only about that much, don't need to fill it all the way up to the top. This is only a small piece of furniture. And then I'm going to get my Dixie Belle White Lightning, and this is a brand new tub. This is a granulated cleaner, so you can see all the granules in there. What you do is when you add it into the water, it dissolves and then it gives you a really strong cleaning solution. So I just pour some in warm water, but you can mix this in a spray bottle and then you've got a ready mix cleaner on hand. And before you start cleaning, just make sure you put on some gloves to protect your hands and jewellery, as this stuff is pretty potent, but that's what you need to cut through whatever's on that surface. Okay, I'm going to speed this up a little bit because it is just me cleaning the piece. I always use a microfiber cloth 9 times out of 10, unless the piece is really bad, and then I might use a scrubby sponge, but I'm just using a microfiber cloth for these because they weren't too bad. And I'm just wiping the cleaning solution all over the piece, making sure you're getting all the recesses. And the reason for cleaning before you do anything else is because if you went straight in and gave this piece of scuff sand without cleaning, what you can actually do is drive the dirt or the oils or whatever's on the surface of that piece. You can drive those things into the grain of the wood, which will affect your paint sticking to that surface properly. So that's why we always clean before we do a scuff sand. Once everywhere was cleaned, I then rinsed it all with clean warm water to get rid of any White Lightning residue on the surface. Okay, so that has been cleaned and now it's dry, and now we can sort out those holes. Remember from when we took the handles off at the very beginning, I'm going to put handles on here that aren't going to have the same holes as these. So if you're keeping the original handles, you don't need to do this step, you can skip this. But if you're changing the handles, then you need to fill in the holes. I'm going to use Dixie Mud in white. This comes in 3 different colours, so that depending on the colour of paint that you're using, you can kind of colour code it or match it to that. I'm going to be using a white colour paint, so I'm going to use a white colour filler. So I'm just using my plastic Dixie Belle spatula to apply the Dixie mud over the holes to fill them in. And I'm also going to just fill a couple of deep scratches on the side of the piece that I noticed as I was cleaning. So this can fill in imperfections as well as hardware holes. Okay, so these have been left to dry overnight, and the next step that you need to do before you paint, we're still in the prep, don't get ahead of yourself, is give a scuff sand to the surface of the piece. I'm also going to sand flat the filler that I did where the handles are going to go, and the reason for scuff sanding is because the finish that's on here is obviously a very smooth varnished finish, and paint generally needs something to grip onto. So by giving the surface a scuff sand, what you're doing is actually kind of roughing that up and creating lots and lots of little areas that are slightly uneven and a bit rougher than the finish that's on here, and giving that paint something to grip onto. You might have heard it be called something like a key in your furniture, a scuff sand, and it literally means just that, a quick scuff sand over the piece. What you don't need to do is strip your piece back to bare wood. There is absolutely no need to do that. It's a waste of time, it's unnecessary, I'll get my words out, and also it can create a very porous surface which will soak your paint up quick. It won't allow your paint to self-level. It'll also mean that it dries quicker before you've had chance to make sure all your paint's smooth. So over sanding is not actually always a good thing. The only time that I would sand back to bare wood is if I'm going to be staining something and you need raw wood for the stain to be absorbed into. But if you're just painting, a scuff sand is absolutely fine. Equally, you don't have to have an electric sander to do a scuff sand with. For years, I had a £20 sander that I bought off Amazon when I first started out. I progressed onto a slightly more expensive sander, and finally I invested in this sander, which has got a vacuum attached to it, and it sucks the dust out of the air as you are sanding. That means I can sand inside, and also I have sensitive eyes, so if dust gets in them, they get very aggravated and whatnot. You can see a video for the sander that I posted a few weeks ago. If you want to re-watch that, it's very non-technical, but it tells you a little bit more about this piece of kit that I use. Okay, so you can just see how little I am actually sanding this piece. All you're looking for when you scuff sand is for the surface to go slightly hazy. That means you've broken through that original finish, which in this case is obviously that varnish that we spoke about at the beginning, and it's going to give that little bit of texture and a rougher surface for the paint to hold on to. For areas that my sander can't access, so for example the recessed area that I'm just doing now, I usually fold a piece of sandpaper in half or use a Dixie Belle sanding sponge just to get in those hard to reach areas. Okay, that's had a scuff sand all over. Now I'm going to drill the holes for the new handles before we start painting. Typically, I don't usually do it in this order because I hate, number one, I hate drilling holes for hardware. I hate messing around with handles, and I'm not going to lie, I normally get Andy to do it all. I can do it, I just don't like doing it. And my way of doing it is very backwards. Andy has this contraption which you can use as a template and basically set it up, and then you can drill holes through on every single drawer in identical places. That thing makes no sense to me. It's got numbers, it's got things, I hate it. So here's my way of doing it, which is very basic and probably isn't even the best way to do it, to be honest, but it works for me because my brain's very simple. So I make a template from A4 paper, and that basically sits in the drawer recess like so. I find the centre point by folding the pieces of paper, and therefore I've got a centre point, and then I measure, these are the handles that I'm going to be using, I measure on there the distance from the handles so they're equal in the centre, if that makes sense. And then I've basically got a template that I can use on each drawer, if I can get it off. So I've already drilled the holes for that one, and then I can just drop it down. I can mark the holes there through the holes, mark the holes through the holes, mark a pencil mark through the holes here. Are you following so far? Because I'm pretty sure I've confused myself. And I'll do that for every single drawer all the way down. Like I say, there is probably a better, more efficient and cleverer way of doing it. This is my way of doing it because I can't deal with things like this. It makes no sense to me at all. So basically what I'm saying is I'm looking for a full-time hole driller. If anybody has any spare time, that would be great. No, I'm kidding. Whatever way works best for you, find your way of working and stick to that. This is my way. Like I say, it's very simple. But once you've got those holes marked out with your pencil, you can then get your drill and drill the holes. This is probably the best way of doing it, as in drilling first before painting, because obviously if you paint and then drill, you risk ruining or scratching your paintwork, which I've done before as well. So my super accurate way of drilling holes is complete. I will say it's actually never let me down, so there is that. And the last thing to do before we can start painting is to make sure that there's no dust on the surface of that piece. So obviously we've been sanding, we've been drilling. The last thing you want to do is get any bits of dust or sawdust trapped in your paint as you start to paint. So I usually use a damp microfiber cloth, or you can use a dry one and spritz your piece with, this is just normal tap water, just to get rid of anything that's on the surface, dust or sawdust or any bits. Also, I am just going to tape off the edges of the drawers so that we get a nice clean edge when we paint them. Right, we're on to the good bit now. We can start painting. So the colour that I'm going to use is Endless Shore from the Silk Mineral Paint range. The first thing you need to do when you crack your pot open is to give it a good stir, and that's because with all paints, heavier ingredients sink to the bottom and lighter ingredients float on the top. So give it a good mix, and that ensures everything's mixed together nicely. I'm going to be applying this with my synthetic Dixie Belle mini angled brush. It's called a mini because it's got a short handle, and it's called an angled brush because it's got angled bristles, so it's on a slight diagonal. This means I can get into all the little nooks and crannies nicely. And the recommendation is, if you want a very smooth finish, to use a synthetic brush. Natural bristle brushes will tend to get you slightly more texture, and you may see brush strokes if you do use a natural bristle brush. Synthetic is better for smooth finishes. Up until this point, I have obviously worked with the drawers in place, but when I'm doing a one colour finish like this, I usually take the drawers out to paint them. I just find it a lot easier. You can access the drawers all the way around the edges, and you don't have to keep pushing them in and out of the piece. I just find it makes a much neater job. So we can go straight ahead and apply this silk mineral paint straight over the top of our prep piece. That's because it has a built-in stain blocking primer. It's also got a built-in top coat. So once this bad boy has had a few coats, it doesn't need anything else. You can just leave it and the job is finished. And that is why silk is such a fuss-free, easy paint to use. So the drawers have had one coat of paint. You can see how well this colour covers. It is phenomenal for a white. It covers exceptionally well. And I'm going to paint the rest of the piece now. I'm just using a slightly smaller brush. It's still a synthetic brush, and that's just because obviously this area that I'm painting now around the drawers is just a smaller surface area, so I just find it's a little bit neater. And then I'm going to do the sides and the top. Don't panic if your first coat looks a little bit patchy or dodgy. They always do, so don't panic at this point. Okay, so my paint has dried about a couple of hours. You need to make sure that it's thoroughly dry before you do this next step, which is to sand in between coats. This is an optional step, you don't have to do it, but I like to do it for a smooth finish. And it also gives you the chance to check over if you've got any drips or buildup of texture anywhere on your piece, and get rid of those before you apply your second coat. So as you can see, I've just found a little area where there was a little gloop of paint, so I'm just sanding that away, and when I recoat that, it'll be perfectly smooth. If you do sand in between coats, just make sure you take a microfiber cloth and remove any dust off the surface of the piece before you apply your second coat, which is what I'm doing now. And I'm just repeating what I did in the first instance, and you will see that the coverage is going to be built up. It's going to have a much more solid colour, and any patchiness will hopefully have disappeared. And just to prove that I did drill my own holes and fit my own handles for once, here's video evidence of me popping those handles on. So I'm just drilling the screws in into the holes that we already did, so there's minimal risk of damaging that paintwork, that freshly painted paintwork. And that's it. That's how easy silk paint is, because we don't have to top coat or anything. That's it. So here's a picture to prove all of my handles line up, even though I did drop the drill and smash it, but we won't talk about that. And a little close-up of the staging with some pretty flowers out of the garden, and the final shot. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to my channel.